How do you feel about the word mercenary?
I've been accused of being one and convicted of being one. It's never worried me. I wanted to be a soldier. I was in the Scots Guards. I was in the Special Air Service.
We'll carry the burden.
I had just left the British Army. The Angolan rebels attacked the company that I worked for. Our men, our livelihood. Let's fight back. Full on fighting.
Equatorial Guinea, West Africa.
They said, right, we think President Obiang is an out-and-out tyrant. Would you get involved in a coup? I said, yeah, why not? We made a mistake. I should have said stop. And I got arrested. If they pull a fucking gun out and shoot me, well, let's just hope they shoot straight. Got 8 years in Chikurubi maximum security prison. It was Christmas for Mugabe. Which body parts are going to go missing first? I want a written deal. I want you guys to sign it, that if I help you, you're going to let me go. The Attorney General said, no, Mann, we do not negotiate with terrorists. I was an intelligence officer in Northern Ireland, and I know that we always negotiate with terrorists. This is how the West is won, is by just putting your balls on the line and going for it.
This week on the show is Simon Mann, who is a British mercenary soldier and former member of the SAS who made his bones in Africa as a private military contractor. He created a company called Executive Outcomes, and with his military knowledge, he would go in and sell his services to the governments of Angola and Sierra Leone to the highest bidder to take care of problems. And in the process, he would employ thousands of highly trained, badass soldiers from South Africa. And this man has stories for days, and you might judge him, but he claims he was always on the moral side of the equation and doing the right thing for elected governments. But at the same time, some of what he did was the basis of the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, Blood Diamond, about what happened in Sierra Leone. And he was out there making money, doing these crazy cowboy things for these governments. And at one point, he decided to pack it all up in 1997 and retire to South Africa. But then it was time for one more mission, and this one was funded by Mark Thatcher, yes, the son of the UK's Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, and he was supposed to go in and depose the dictator of a tiny country in Africa called Equatorial Guinea. And he went in for this last mission, but it went horribly wrong. And he was arrested on the airport tarmac in Zimbabwe and thrown into one of the worst prisons in the world. From there, after 4 years, he was extradited to the same country of the dictator he was trying to overthrow, and again thrown into prison. He thought he would be shot in the head by this guy, but later he was pardoned. He has an incredible story of what it's like to push it as a human being. And you're either going to love Simon or hate Simon, but you can't argue that he doesn't have a fascinating story and didn't push the limits of everything in the process. So sit back. It has a crazy conclusion because he's now good friends with the same guy that he tried to depose as a dictator. And so, as usual, we bring some crazy things here at London Real. And another crazy thing we're bringing in the next few weeks is our Business Accelerator program. This is my 8-week course that shows you how to take your passion and turn it into a business the same way I did with London Real, taking it from a small podcast into a 7-figure media business. And I'm taking a small group of people on one major mission to change your life, and to show you that you can be in charge of your own destiny, that you can live your passion every day and not work for someone else doing work you don't care about. And I've got graduates from around the world that have actually done this and built businesses, whether it's Max Keeling with The Investment Coach or Claire Lim, who opened up a movement studio in Hong Kong after they graduated from my course. I'm gonna walk you through 2 hours of live calls with me, private mentoring from me and my team leaders. Get in on this. We won't be doing it for another year, so be there. You can go to londonreal.tv/biz, B-I-Z. And now I leave you with the crazy stories of Mr. Simon Mann. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Simon Mann, the British mercenary and former SAS officer who served 7 years of a 34-year jail sentence for your role in a failed coup d'etat in 2004 to replace the dictator of Equatorial Guinea in Africa. You were charged with crimes against head of state and crimes against the government, yet were subsequently pardoned in 2009. You've written about the experiences in your memoir titled Cry Havoc. Today, you continue your work as a paid military contractor for oil and gas and mining promotion in Africa, and have worked with Vice magazine on a series in Venezuela. And you're also currently writing a fiction trilogy told by a woman, which you began writing while still in prison. Simon, welcome to London Real.
Thank you.
It's great having you here, and I can't wait to get in and ask you more about the coup, etc. But as I learn more about you, I was just wondering if you could kind of walk us through, say, what your life was like, say, in the late 80s, early 90s, when you're running executive outcomes and you're doing, contracting work in Africa. You must have seen some things and experienced some things that I probably wouldn't be able to fathom or understand. They say sometimes life is stranger than fiction. If you had to tell people what you were doing around then, what was like a typical day or a typical year, what would that be?
Okay. Well, it is, like you say, pretty inexplicable and pretty hard to describe, really, because in one sense, we were having the time of our lives. In another sense, we were in very grave danger. And in another sense, we thought, and I still think, that we were doing something good, because we were fighting on the right side in Angola and Sierra Leone, where we went to subsequent to Angola. In both cases, we were fighting for the government, and in both cases, we were fighting against people who were doing some terrible wrongs. But we were enjoying it, and we were making money out of it. And it's a long story, but so in order to kind of describe it in a nutshell, it was an amazing period of my life and very satisfying and great fun.
And so if you had to describe what EO did at the time, which is Executive Outcomes,
Yes.
which it's just, for me, it's kind of like a badass name. It seems like you guys were doing like some gangster things down there. But what was the mission of a company like that? What are some of the kind of things that it would accomplish that you could offer your services?
Yeah, Executive Outcomes in the form that it fought in came about entirely through UNITA, the Angolan rebels, returning to war following the loss by them of the November 92 elections. And they had signed international peace agreements, they had promised blah-de-blah-de-blah, they'd promised upside down, this way, that way, the other way. They will not go back to war. And they did go back to war, and almost the first thing they did was attack Soyo operating base, which is an Angolan town on the southern lip of the mouth of the River Congo. And by doing so, they attacked the company that I worked for, Heritage Oil and Gas. I had just left the British Army for the third and the last time, following the first Gulf War, where I served with the general, our general. And I joined my friend, Tony Buckingham, in this company called Heritage. And that company, we had one project, which was offshore Angola, Lot 424, and our operating base was Soyo. When UNITA went back to war, they attacked Soyo. And Tony said, right, well, that's the end of our new business. And I'd left the army again. I'd been offered a very good job in the army. For me, the Heritage was everything. I'd met a lovely woman, fallen in love with her. And I said, Tony, no, wait. Let's fight back. Why should these guys take a whole country back to war? Why should they be able to attack us, our men, our equipment, our livelihoods? Let's fight back. And Tony said, no, you're crazy. How are we going to do that? Da, da, da. Anyway, it's a whole long story, and it's sort of in the book. But in the end, the Angolan government basically paid us and 60 South African mercenaries to retake Soyo, which with 3,000 kids, Angolan kids, boys, and they were in uniform and they had AKs, but they were kids. So our 60 South Africans and those 3,000 kids basically attacked Soyo to retake it from UNITA, who had 3,000 of their best troops waiting for us, ready. They knew we were coming, and a pitched battle, resulted. A very African pitched battle, but nevertheless a pitched battle.
A pitched battle, what does that mean?
A pitched battle is one, it's not like we'll run away and then you run away and we'll run away. It was like full on.
Full on fighting.
Full on fighting. At times hand to hand, very close. And
you were there. You were there.
I took the guys in, and then I was running the things from, we operated from a place called Cabinda. It's a long story, and a very hard 5, 6 weeks, 3 months, it rolled on. And the South Africans were just unbelievably good, incredibly good soldiers, and in the end we won. It's a long story.
Okay.
But, and then the Angolans said, wow, that was interesting, because we haven't seen people do that kind of thing before. They were especially interested in the fact that none of the South Africans had gone back around to them, right, and said that we hadn't paid them right or treated them right or whatever.
Okay.
Quite interesting.
So this was kind of a new professional style of mercenary they had never seen or dealt with before.
Well, more or less. Because the weird thing was that most of the South Africans with us had literally months or years or 1 or 2 years before they had been fighting on the other side.
Okay.
Because of the way the
For the Angolan rebels.
For UNITA.
For UNITA, right.
Because they'd been South African soldiers backed by America, okay, and the CIA.
Okay.
Because
and yet they stayed with you.
They came to us very gladly because, of course, South Africa was in transition. Was going over to a majority government. Nelson Mandela had been released. Their pension plans were being torn up. They'd served for some of them for 5, 10 or 12, 15 years fighting, and now suddenly everything's being taken away from underneath them. So when somebody came along and said, okay guys, we've got something for you to fight for and make some money with, they came.
Okay.
Pretty weird period of time, because remember, the Berlin Wall had only recently come down, so the world was in that kind of, it's miles away from where we are now.
Yeah.
But there was a sort of a vacuum post the Berlin Wall coming down, post the Cold War. And you've got to remember that Angola was the hardest, hottest proxy war of the entire Cold War.
Okay, so that was where the communism,
that
the
was
capitalism.
Really, but also, there were tank battles.
Yeah.
We don't know about that here, and people don't know about it in the States.
Not at all.
But it happened. So those South Africans, they were looking for a way out.
Okay.
And we offered one.
And it's fair to say that the Angolan government couldn't have pulled off what you pulled off. they couldn't have found the people to go in and do that job.
They were very open about it. They after Soyo and after we'd won at Soyo, they said, listen, we are losing the war. Can you come and help us properly instead of just this single operation on Soyo? And Tony Buckingham and I, we sat down, we talked about it at great length, in terms of our business, our morality, our personal lives and everything. And basically by then we sort of realized that by having done Soyo, we'd basically committed ourselves. And that all of those things now required us to see it through.
You had committed yourselves.
We had committed ourselves.
Because you had done this thing.
We'd done the
So
first
now you
thing.
were in.
We're in.
It's too late to be out.
Too late to be out in a way. I mean, we could have just said, okay, fuck off, we're out of here. But we didn't want to, because by then we'd become very good friends with the Angolans. We felt that they were right. They had won an election in November 92, which was free and fair, judged free and fair by the UN. And, we'd started a fight with some really powerful enemies because the CIA and the United States were behind UNITA.
Okay.
So was Big Oil, and so were De Beers.
The diamond conglomerate.
The diamonds.
So how do you fight against that? It's tricky.
Well, we won.
Yeah, you won. Okay.
In the end.
Now, for people that don't understand the concept of paid military contractors or mercenary, how do you feel about the word mercenary? What does that mean to you?
I've heard it so much, and I've been accused of being one and convicted of being one, and it's never worried me, and it still doesn't.
Okay.
Because you can be a mercenary doctor. A mercenary doctor is a guy who worries more about money than about the health of his patients.
Okay.
Right?
But it is a derogatory word because it's implying that money is more important than something else.
Absolutely. So a mercenary soldier is a pejorative term.
Okay. All right. And so for people trying to get their head around this, because I think the most recent experience that the global community had with paid military contractor was, of course, the Blackwater guys and what happened in Iraq. And, of course, they were portrayed as these kind of bad people charging money, killing people. Mm-hmm. And you came from Scots Guard, SAS, like proper, serious military breeding here in the UK. And now they hear of this story of you now being this paid military person. Mm-hmm. You said there's questions of morality you had to ask yourself and this kind of thing. How do you explain it to people that, look, this is me making a choice that I think was right, or this is like any other job out there?
Well, first of all, I have to declare an interest. Okay, so Eric Prince is a friend of mine.
Yes, who is the former president of Blackwater, the founder of Blackwater, but
that's right.
Has since sold his interests.
He sold it and it's changed its name and so on and so forth.
Okay.
But Eric is presently in the news for putting a big plan to the United States government for a very private military contractor operation in Afghanistan.
Okay.
To basically replace American troops with a mercenary force. That's in the news.
Okay.
And he's a friend of mine, so I have to sort of
Okay.
put my cards on the table here.
Okay. And how?
And going back, to go back to your question, how do I deal with it? Well, I deal with it very differently, as you would imagine, depending on who is asking the question and how they're asking it. Because, serious people, in a way, don't sort of ask the question because they know. I mean, for example, and I find it quite a negative debate in a way, in the sense that, for example, the Gurkhas are a part of the British Army. They come from Nepal. They're not here for a love of England. They're born in the Himalayas. Okay, now anyone who's pejorative about them and say, the Gurkhas are mercenaries, they'd tell you to get lost in very short order because they fought for the UK for, over 100 years, incredibly well, and they regard themselves as part of the British Army. The British Army is a professional army. When I joined the British Army, I didn't imagine I was doing it out of a sense of duty. I wanted to join the British Army. I wanted to be a soldier.
Okay.
I wanted to be paid. I wanted to join that entity
Okay. But it was more than a job, though. You swear loyalty, and there is some nationality and pride along with that.
But all that loyalty is there anyway. I mean, if there was a war, if there was an existential war, we'd all join up anyway. So I'm now saying, oh no, well, I actually want to be a soldier. I don't want to be a doctor or a dentist. But that isn't me saying I'm being particularly patriotic. I'm just saying that's the profession I want to do.
Okay. But in the Army, there's people that don't feel that way. People join for different reasons. But you're saying you joined because I wanted to be a soldier.
I think people join for all sorts of different reasons. But I remember when I was probably, let's say, 24, 25, the war in Oman was in progress. Which was more or less a secret war. It wasn't well publicised, but there was a war against communists, and this was like the 70s. Now, I could have actually got into the same firefight in Oman by 3 completely different routes. Okay, I could have been a seconded British officer working with the Oman troops. I could have been a contracted British officer, somebody who'd left the British Army and now joined the Oman Armed Forces under contract. Or I could have been an SAS troop commander in the British forces actually fighting. Okay, now I could have gone to exactly the same firefight with more or less the same people around me by 3 different routes. But most people would say that one of those was a mercenary. And I would just say, well, so what? I'd just say, well, if you want, I mean, is a girl a whore or is she a whore? You know, what?
Or is she a gold digger?
Does she do it for a living or does she do it for fun? I don't know. But you can use the word how you want.
All right, so it's perspective in your opinion. It's context. It's how you want to look at it and bring your own baggage to the table.
I think what matters is what you do.
Okay.
In the process. You know, if you are... I mean, mercenaries, there were some really horrific mercenary incidents in the 60s.
Right.
In Biafra and in the Congo.
Congo, yeah. What were some of the things that happened in the Congo?
Oh, well, I don't know. I wasn't there.
Okay.
But, you know, the raping of nuns, the robbing of banks, you know, burning this village and killing everyone in it in order to pretend that the enemy had done it. I mean, There were some absolutely horrific...
By mercenaries from Europe, from Spain or England or who knows?
Yeah, absolutely, from all over. Yeah.
And they gave mercenaries a bad name.
Yeah, it completely devalued the currency.
Okay. And so you're saying I wasn't doing that. I was providing a service, and I believe we were on the right side working for the government.
No, what I would really like to say is, if I put together a company to go and help in whatever country, here or there, or if I'm Eric and I put together my force to go and to do Africa, the criteria surely is, the criteria by which I should be judged, is surely what have I done? How good a job have we done? You know, have we achieved what we were asked to achieve? Is that a good job? And have we done it in a good way?
Okay.
You know, have we raped people, burnt villages? No. Have we achieved the objective? Have we brought about peace? Have we won? Have we actually managed to sort of improve the situation? Yes. Then we're okay.
And how do you rate Blackwater overall?
I don't know Blackwater. I wasn't in Iraq.
Right.
And I haven't been anywhere, you know, I haven't seen them. I've had lots of stories because obviously all my friends, you know, were involved, many of my friends. But I don't, you know, if you don't see what actually happens yourself, if you're not actually there, it's very hard to say.
You must have an opinion. I mean, you're in the same business, so do you think they were probably misunderstood, given a bad rep in the press?
No, I think some bad things happened.
Okay. And while we're on the subject, this proposal to kind of privatize the military force in Afghanistan, what are your thoughts on that kind of a concept, or what he's proposing?
Again, I think, you know, we have to look at these things in terms of the best result for everyone. And, you know, maybe Eric is right. Maybe that is the best way of doing it. But I actually personally think that that's an admission of failure. You know, if we're really saying that a group of privately contracted military personnel can do a better job than the United States Armed Forces, then surely something's wrong.
You think so?
I would think so.
Maybe a profit-driven company will always do something better than a government entity.
Well, first of all, I think that's an admission of failure.
Okay.
I don't see why that should be true. I mean, I was in the Scots Guards, which has been going since 1642. I was in the Special Air Service. I knew David Stirling, who founded it. And both of those organisations that I was in absolutely prided themselves on doing everything they were asked to do better than anybody else.
Right.
And 110% of their ability.
Right.
And commitment.
Out of probably a sense of pride and nationalism and not to be paid.
Not nationalistic. It's just like this is the Scots Guards, or this is the Special Air Service, and this is what we do.
Okay. A pride in that unit themselves.
And even more the people with you.
Right.
Because we all had that sense.
Okay.
And that was the. I think it's a bit like a football team in a way. You really don't want to let the rest of the team down. You want to do as best you can. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
Was your biggest obstacle in creating executive outcomes trying to mimic that same type of camaraderie and dedication in your own private contract service?
No, because I wasn't really. I mean, Tony Buckingham and I were the joint founders of Executive Outcomes, in the sense that we got the job. The job that made Executive Outcomes was Angola.
Yeah, which
we
you just stumbled on, right? I mean, that stumbled on you, right?
In a way, but I'd helped Tony get into Angola in the first place. I mean, he was an oil and gas guy, and I'm a businessman, and I'd helped him get into Angola a bit, and we'd worked together. And suddenly this thing happened, and our business was under threat. And so we decided to do what we did. I knew the right people down in South Africa, Ibn Barlow, who is he founded Executive Outcomes, the company. It's his name on the, which he'd actually done before we went to see him for something else. And we all worked together. But I was never like a sort of on-the-ground officer with Executive Outcomes.
Okay.
I was more like some horrible staff officer from the First World War who used to sort of come along and say, "Okay, now chaps, listen carefully, because tomorrow morning
you're like the CEO.
You're going to have to go and do something."
Okay. And yet you must have fostered, some type of a sense of, unity with these people.
I didn't have to, because the South Africans were, these guys had been fighting for like 10, 15 years.
Okay.
And these people were the very best that they had. And they were coming out of the best units. And one of the things about Executive Outcomes was that we had 3,000 people on the books who we'd vetted but didn't even get into Executive Outcomes.
Right. And you were saying that no other time in history would you have had access to 3,000 well-qualified troops.
Well, we had 5,000 because we had 2,000 in Executive Outcomes. Right. And we had another 3,000 who wanted to be in Executive Outcomes.
Right.
And they were all vetted.
And that wouldn't have happened 10 years later or 10 years earlier.
It couldn't happen today. They don't exist.
You couldn't find them in...
Those guys don't exist.
Ex-SEALs,
Well, no, that's an interesting point. Because actually, I was just going to say, because they do exist in America and in the UK, but it's a very different story. Because those South Africans, at that point in time, $5,000 would buy them a farm. In South Africa, it would buy them what their ambition was. That wouldn't buy you very much with SEALs today. Okay. I promise you.
So they were cheap. They were cheap labor at the time.
Or even then. I mean, actually, I came under some stick later, because I had people from the SAS saying, "Hey, boss, what happened there? Because why did you go and hire all these bloody South Africans?"
They wanted the jobs.
Yeah. Right. And I said, "I'll tell you why. Because firstly, they're much better value. They're cheaper. Secondly, I don't think you guys would have done it. Not because you couldn't, but because you wouldn't. It was extremely hairy what happened.
Okay.
And thirdly, you don't know the climate, you don't know Africa, you don't know the people. The South Africans had been, remember, working with and fighting with UNITA for years beforehand. Right. So they knew the theatre of operations, they knew the people.
Okay. And so Angola happens, and you continue on with Executive Outcomes. You're now probably getting better at this. What are some of the highlights of that period as you look back, things you're proud of? And again, you got to be able to tell me, what are the things how is your life now when you have an army of 2,000 highly qualified men that you can send in? You must get some very weird phone calls from very strange people in Africa entertaining ideas with you.
Yeah, to a certain extent, but Tony and I both, we stayed very much under the parapet. We were not executive outcomes. And the executive outcomes office in Pretoria, they had a families office, they had a padre, they had a PR office. It was very well run. Even Vale set it up very well. And it was a very efficient machine. Who were Tony Buckingham and Simon Mann? Never heard of them.
Okay.
No contract, no shares, nothing.
Okay.
But then, as things rolled on and we went into Sierra Leone, I remember actually one of the first real alarm bells ringing in my mind was I was on a flight because we had 2 Boeing 727s that we were flying around Africa. Because by then we had 2,000 people, some in Angola, some in Sierra Leone. I was on a flight back down from Sierra Leone. And by this stage it was a big machine. And I sort of thought people didn't really know who I was. I hoped that they didn't. Walked back to the loo in the aeroplane, and this big Zulu, black sergeant sort of put his arm out as I walked down to the loo. He said, "Excuse me, sir, but I know exactly who you are. We've won in Angola now, and now we're about to win in Sierra Leone. Where are we going next?" And I made some joke with him, and I went off to the loo, and I walked back to the front of the aeroplane, and I sat down, and I thought, this is now getting very dangerous.
And wait,
Because, well, where are we going next?
so he was one of your guys?
Yeah. This was our plane.
Okay, all right.
Everybody on the plane, the pilots, everything.
And so he said, where are we going next?
I just thought, wait a minute, this is now very dangerous, because if he's thinking that in that way, other people are thinking the same thing.
Then we can do anything we want.
No, the real thing was, I thought, well, that because at that point we'd got involved in 2 really nasty wars in a good way, and we'd actually won them. We'd actually managed to bring about peace. And one of my great points of pride is that in both of those, nobody has ever charged us or accused us of any wrongdoing. Nobody. There wasn't a single court case against us, anywhere.
Okay.
Which regular armies don't have that. I mean, the British Army are being charged in Afghan, all this nonsense, but nobody has charged us with anything. And I think that was correct. I mean, I don't think anybody did anything wrong.
And that shows that you did everything by the book.
By the book.
Okay.
And I'm very, very proud of that, But then I thought, well, wait a minute, we've actually done the right thing in 2 places. Okay, we've made a lot of money out of it, but we have done the right thing. But now, what if somebody says, oh, well, let's start a war for us to go and... You see what I mean?
Yeah.
At what point does the solution become the problem?
Right. So you're worried that this thing might have been getting too much momentum.
I just thought that when that guy said that to me, I just thought, this is going to get... Because remember, we don't have any regulations here. This is not British Army. There's no Queen's regulations. There's no American Army law code being applied. These are private individuals.
Yeah. Besides losing life, what is the downside? Could the United Nations have charged you with something? Things went well according to you in Angola and Sierra Leone, but if they went gone wrong, what happens? You're put up for charges in these countries, or can the UN get involved and tell you to stop doing this?
The UN were in both countries and were absolutely useless.
That's a theme. That's a theme of the UN, right? Okay.
Not only were they useless, but they bad-mouthed us and asked us for favours all over the place whenever they ran into trouble, which they constantly did. And we bailed them out on numerous occasions.
Okay.
So I'm not a big fan.
Okay, but they would have never tried to do anything. Who's the police force at this point when you're going, between countries and negotiating with the government or the rebels, these kinds of things? I mean, there's no referee here.
Well, the referee actually is Uncle Sam, because in both countries, Angola and Sierra Leone, just as we had approached the point of we were like 80% to actually winning the thing completely and having everything squared away, we were ordered out. And that came from the White House.
Okay.
On both occasions.
Really? Via the CIA?
Via the presidents of those countries.
Okay. And you listened?
Well, they were our hosts.
Okay, right. And then, okay, interesting. And why did they stop you at 80% done?
I think I didn't blame them, and I wasn't surprised. I just thought, there are people in Washington and London who are looking at this and thinking, well, it doesn't really matter how good a job these guys have done. This is not how we want the world to be run.
By these mercenary units that are winning wars.
And I also more cynically thought, we're just having too much fun. Someone's bound to send us home.
Now, a lot of people would say, "Oh my gosh, you're having too much fun killing people in these countries," and they're going to say, "Simon, you're an evil man."
But we were trying to stop the war.
Right. Okay. All right. But I'm sure the Angolan rebels didn't feel that way.
Definitely not.
No. Okay. And in Sierra Leone, you said we created a diamond mine from scratch. Can you briefly talk about what happened in Sierra Leone? Because all I ever hear coming out of that country are conflict diamonds. So what happened in there? What did you do?
No, but I mean, Sierra Leone is a great source of diamonds, as is Angola. And the Koidu kimberlite in Sierra Leone is a world-recognized, world-renowned diamond mine. So we certainly weren't creating anything out of scratch. And the movie Blood Diamond, DiCaprio, that is actually based on our story. But of course, only after Hollywood had got hold of it and completely changed the story.
Okay. Was he playing you?
Well, that's come up as a bit of a joke on a couple of occasions. But in the movie, the South Africans are absolutely the bad guys. Whereas I can assure you in Sierra Leone, they were the exact opposite. Because the RUF, who were the enemy in Sierra Leone, were world-class atrocity committers.
Okay.
Who we defeated.
Okay. All right. So all this time you're making a lot of money, more money than you've ever made as a soldier.
Not in Sierra Leone, because in actual fact, we really were never paid for Sierra Leone. But that's okay. I don't expect any bronze statue. We kind of did it with the profits from Angola.
Okay. But you're still making money.
We were making a lot of money in Angola.
Okay. All right. And even though you don't have the shares in the company, you're still finding money. Money's coming your way.
No, money's coming, yeah.
Okay.
We're managing money.
And you're enjoying this. You're a businessman. You're having success. And you're...
Yeah, I'm really a soldier, and I really wanted to win that war.
Okay. All right. And what comes next? Because you stepped away from this for a few years, or what was,
What you mean? What comes next now?
No. After Sierra Leone.
You mean after Sierra Leone?
What happened? To you?
Okay. Well, we'd started a diamond mining company, which we started in Angola. That led us to Sierra Leone, and for a while I ran that company. I was Chief Operations Officer Africa. So we built 3 mines in Angola. We built 1 in the Koidu, Sierra Leone, where there was still fighting going on. So it was quite, it was very challenging. It was very interesting. I knew nothing about mining. Had some very interesting partners. Robert Friedland, the famous mining entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. Benny Steinmetz, the famous, And so...
What are these people like?
Benny I've never met, but he was a great shareholder and a great investor because he always did exactly what he said he was going to do. Robert is amazing. I mean, he's probably the world's number 1 mining magnate today. And sort of, I like him a lot, he's a friend. A little bit crazy, but immense vision and sort of drive. And interesting guy, really interesting. Really gets things done, obviously. And then I retired from that. I did the Peking to Paris motor car rally with Tony Buckingham.
Okay.
In an Aston Martin DB5. We were still friends when we got to Paris. Just.
You went from where to Paris?
Beijing.
Okay. All right.
It was the 100th anniversary of the original motor car rally, believe it or not. Okay. 1897. They went from Peking to Paris.
Wow.
And this was the centenary thing.
All right.
So we did that, and then I moved down to Cape Town with my family. I have a young family.
Okay. If you had to tell people, I mean, part of your expertise is doing business in Africa.
Yes.
And understanding all of these local nuances and power plays and things happening there.
Or not.
Or not. Well, how would you describe to people how you do business in Africa?
How do I do business in Africa? Gently and slowly.
Can you be more specific?
Well, because if you try and do it not gently and not slowly, you won't do any business in Africa.
Okay. And is every country different?
I don't know. I think people are the same the world over. And I don't see a huge difference between doing business in the Middle East to doing business in Africa. Obviously, people are the same, but there are cultural differences and different ways. And basically, if somebody's talking to me who doesn't know Africa and they want me to do something business-wise in Africa, I say, okay, well, look, in Africa, there is going to be a long checklist, and we have to go the whole way through the checklist, and we have to get a tick into every single box on that checklist. You can't jump. You can't sort of say, oh, well, the guy at the top said this, and so all these people are going to fall into line. They're not, because this is Africa. So basically, we have to work the whole way down this list, and we have to get a tick into every single box, from the president down to the magic man in the village. Okay? But before you run away and say, well, I don't want to do that, I say, but it's actually not that difficult. You just have to do it. It's not going to cost that much money. We just have to get each one of these guys on site.
Okay. You have to go have a conversation with them, sit down, listen to their problems, come up with an agreement.
Yeah. I remember arriving in Saurimo in the middle of Angola in the war, and the general was there, and Saurimo is like a 2-hour flight in a jet from Luanda. And I got hold of the general, and I said, okay, I've just come from General de Matos, who's the head of the Angolan Armed Forces, and we've got our troops here, and this is what's going to happen now. And he just shook his head. He said, no. I am in charge in Saurimo. I will tell you what's going to happen here. I said, but this is a direct order in writing from Luanda. He said, I don't care. Now, suddenly the sort of British Army officers sort of, it's like all the gyros start wobbling.
Right.
What do you mean you don't care?
Right. So all the chain of command assumptions and protocols that might be in the British Army go out the window there. So as long as you're aware of that, you can negotiate.
You have to take that into account.
Okay. And at some point when you're flying on this, 707 into Sierra Leone. 727, sorry. And the Zulu guy says that to you. And do you ever think back and say, wait a second, I'm an Eton grad. My dad was a famous cricketer. I was in the SAS. I was in the Scots Guard. I was wearing the bearskin hats. And now here I am, mining diamonds in conflict zones in Sierra Leone. Do you ever wonder, how did I get here?
Well, on that list you gave just now, the Special Air Service bit answers all the questions. Because that's I think, traditionally in the UK, that is the radical part, if you like. Because in fact, in my day, the moment you opened your mouth to your commanding officer, if you were in the Scots Guards, and you went and saw your commanding officer and you said, excuse me, sir, I'd quite like to volunteer for the SAS, you had just basically put a big cross against your name. And really, what that cross said was, this officer does not like the army.
All right, so
this officer wants to go and join the hippies,
All right.
The military hippies.
So it was like the Delta Force guys in America, the counterculture rebels.
But Delta Force, I don't know how much of the history you know, but Delta Force, Charlie Beckwith and Burroughs, they did the SAS selection. They went back to America and said, this is how. We have to do this. We haven't got this. And Bucky Burroughs was the Sergeant Major, and Charlie Beckwith. Beckwith, I think, is known as the unguided missile.
Okay. So the Delta was formed from SAS.
And in fact, the original Delta, when they first did their selection, they first did their training, there were many SAS instructors there So the Delta Force and the Special Air Service are very close.
Okay. And not SEALs. SEALs is still an elite unit, but different.
SEALs are close to the SBS,
Okay.
which is the Special Boat Section,
Service, right.
who come from the Royal Marines, and
But still, it attracts a certain type of person that doesn't want to go, quote unquote, the corporate route in the military and wants to do.
I don't know the SEALs, and I don't know Delta. I know one or two people. But definitely in the UK Armed Forces, if you're in the Scots Guards and you say, I want to go to Hereford, I want to do SAS selection, you're putting up a flag that says, you want to, I remember being absolutely grilled by a senior general in the Scots Guards who'd known my father in the war and everything else. And he said, what the hell do you think you're doing, joining that bunch of cowboys, The place for people like you, Simon, is with your troops in the battalion. Yes, sir, but I think I want to go.
And why did you want to go there?
I don't know.
This is 70s then? 80s?
No, it's a funny story. My cousin is somebody called Lachlan McLean, he's the head of the Clan McLean, and he joined the SAS from Eton. He was my first cousin, and I was sent this magazine, because in those days it wasn't all like now, and it wasn't all sort of hush-hush and secret. In the Sunday Times colour supplement, there was this article about what the SAS were doing to the Indonesians in the Borneo, what was called the emergency, or the confrontation, I think it was called, when Indonesia were trying to overthrow the Sultan of Brunei, and take over Borneo. And the SAS were deep inside Indonesian territory, fighting Indonesians.
Okay. As mercenaries, but paid by the British government.
No, this was a full-on British Army deployment.
Right.
I mean, they had Royal Artillery, they had infantry behind them.
Okay.
This wasn't an undercover thing.
Okay.
What was undercover was that they were miles inside Indonesia. But anyway, I read this article and I thought, I was about 15 or something, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is like, I want to do that.
So that planted the seed.
I wanted to do it.
Okay. And so it was in the 80s or the 70s?
No, this was in the 60s. This was like 67.
Right, that's when you heard about it, and then you joined later.
I was at school then.
Right.
I got sent a magazine by my nanny, who said, look what Lockie's doing.
And how old were you when you joined the SAS?
24, 25.
And what were your memories of those years?
Very good. I mean, it was extremely hard. Very young, and they're not young. They're old. Everyone's older than you. And a very different experience from the army.
Okay. But you liked that? Hardcore?
Yeah, of course, I loved the challenge. Unfortunately, when I was there, it was Northern Ireland, which was, a dreadful business.
Not fun.
Just horrible to think of. We were in the supposedly it's in the UK.
Right. So.
And you just thought, what are these people all doing?
Why are we fighting each other? Why are we doing this?
Well, we were fighting to try and keep them to stop them from fighting.
Okay.
The first time I went to Northern Ireland, I wasn't even 21. Old Etonian 20-year-old in charge of 30 Glaswegian lunatics from the Scots Guards, dealing with religious fervour and God knows what. What could go wrong?
What's the worst thing you saw in Northern Ireland?
Oh, not good things. Civilians being blown up.
Pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And how did they treat an Etonian in the SAS? They give you a little bit of stick?
Who, the Scots Guards?
Yeah, or the SAS themselves.
Well, if you're in Northern Ireland in my day with the Special Air Service, then they definitely didn't know. Nobody knew who you were or what you were. I mean, soldiers might have an idea because of the length of your hair, or because you were undercover. Scots Guards. That in itself is a whole. The history of Northern. You've got a lot of American people who watch this. I mean, the history of Northern Ireland and the British involvement with Ireland is a massive subject and very complicated. I mean, the Scots Guards, the regiment that I joined as a 20-year-old, was formed in 1642 by royal commission to the Duke of Argyll to suppress the rebellious Irish. Which the guardsmen used to remind the people on the Falls Road in Belfast about from time to time, who quite often would say, "Well, you haven't done a very good fucking job, have you? You're still here. It's 300 years later."
So there's quite a history there.
Big history.
Did that prepare you for anything you had to see and do in Africa?
Interesting question. I mean, you know, they always say that when you look at any soldier, you have to look at his military childhood in the same way as a psychologist looks at. So if they say you want to study Rommel, you have to look at Rommel's when Rommel was first a soldier, and the same with Montgomery or whatever. Now, my military childhood was Northern Ireland, you know, where basically we were trying to be policemen, and the whole British Army had to reinvent itself. You know, Aden was ended in 68 or 67. And that was when the British pulled out of Aden with serious fighting, all sorts of bad stuff going on.
It's in Northern Ireland, Aden.
And then there was a year gap, 1968. And then 69, the British Army was into Northern Ireland. 1970, I joined the British Army. So, in a way, there was a very important lesson there for me, because suddenly the British Army had to reinvent itself as a police force on UK territory, because Northern Ireland is the UK. So the stuff that we were taught as to how to suppress a riot when I was at Sandhurst did not apply to the UK, because it contravened UK law.
Right.
You know, drawing a white line across the road and then withdrawing from it and saying anyone who crosses the white line will be shot, which was the drill I was taught at Sandhurst, is illegal in the UK. It's perfectly legal if you're in Kenya, Aden, Hong Kong, or anywhere else, according to the British. It's absolutely fine there, but you can't do that here.
Okay.
So the British Army had to very, very quickly sort itself out. Bloody Sunday, you know the story of Bloody Sunday, which I acted in that movie. And so this was an amazing...
What year was Bloody Sunday?
The actual incident was, I think, 73?
Okay. And that was in Northern Ireland at Belfast?
Wait, it can't be 73.
No, earlier.
It was 71.
Okay.
That was in Londonderry.
Okay.
And that was when the parachute regiment shot those boys who, wrongly. And that was the moment when everyone really had to grow up in terms of what we're now doing as against what we used to do, how we see ourselves. And I think probably, your question is very good, because if I then translate that forwards into my attitude to executive outcomes in Africa and everything else, I do come to the thing from a policing, let's get this straight, rather than a crash bang wallop.
Yeah. Rather than let's just kill them all, it's more of let's figure this out so we can move forward.
Well, I acted in Bloody Sunday, in the movie, and I played the chief baddie. I played the part of Colonel Wilford, who commanded the parachute regiment.
You acted in it?
Yeah.
Wow.
As a named actor. And that was the movie. Paul Greengrass was the director, and that was the movie that took Paul to Hollywood.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but it was a big deal. And I was also the technical director on the movie. And I can't remember the name of the general who was in charge of the operation into Londonderry that day. And Paul Greengrass, and we were talking about it, and we were sort of having a chat, and he said, I don't understand that general. He was very far forward for a general. He was right with Wilford at the battalion command post. And what was he saying to Wilford? And what were they, I say, well, I don't know. I wasn't there. But I can tell you one thing. That general, his military childhood was fighting Germans in Germany. And if those guys came across a bit of a town that there was resistance, the first thing they did was bombard the place with artillery for hours, and then they'd drive tanks straight through the buildings.
That was how they dealt with urban warfare.
Because they didn't want any of their men to be killed by these people. And that was the military childhood of that general.
Okay.
Wasn't interested in. Now, in actual fact, when you think about that in those terms, it's amazing that in fact there wasn't less damage done on the day.
Right.
But I'm not trying to excuse anything that happened there, because it was wrong, and the whole army had to grow up as a result of it.
Okay.
But as it affected me, it did affect me. Of course it did.
Continue watching this fascinating conversation for free by clicking on the link below to visit our website, and I'll see you on the inside.
And I said, you're killing people in here. It's like a firing squad in here, because it's just a slow-moving bullet. Because if a poor person comes in here with no outside support, no money, in 5 years he'll be dead, because the food is so bad and the conditions are so bad. You're killing people. It's just the bullet, instead of going poof on a firing squad, it's a 5-year bullet.